a date with a friend to walk your dogs or have lunch this week, and you didn't show up, you might need forgiveness. If you told a raunchy joke this week which offended a friend or coworker, say it with me, you might need forgiveness. If you lost your temper and lashed out at someone in your family or one of your friends, you might need forgiveness. If you overslept or got wrapped up in a TV show, a good book, Facebook, or even Candy Crush, and didn't follow through on an obligation, you might need forgiveness. If you spent more time shopping this week than being with the people that need you, you might need forgiveness. Our Bible lists several ways that you can miss the mark and hurt others and ruin your relationships. Consider the 10 Commandments, which lists murder, adultery, stealing, lying, envy, dishonoring your parents. Or consider Paul's letter to the Romans, which includes arguments, starting arguments, and gossiping, and greed, arrogance, lacking love, and failing to extend mercy. In addition, our faith tradition counts the 7 deadly sins as pride and greed and lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth, which is laziness. We human beings have been made in the image of God, so we have the power and potential to do what is good and right. But we've also been given free will, and so we often miss the mark by either choosing to do what is right or by doing things that actually hurt others. The season of Advent is a time when we prepare for Jesus. Not the pleasant memory of Jesus in the manger, but the return of Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the one who is going to level the playing field, as Isaiah said, and set things straight and smooth over the rough places. We are preparing for both a time of judgment and a time of salvation. Last week's gospel focused on the signs of the big shakeup that's coming, an end of all things as we know it, and the beginning of all things as they should be. This week's gospel from Luke is about our preparation for that time, or more specifically, our preparation for the person who is coming, Jesus. John the Baptist called people to be washed or immersed or baptized in the River Jordan as a public show that they were changing their hearts. Don't run from your problems. Don't flee from judgment. Face it and change, he shouted. Stop what you're doing. Drop your sin-filled ways and give yourself and your life to God. One of the most powerful decisions that we can make that will change our heart is about forgiveness. When we extend forgiveness, give it to others, it changes the way we interact with them. It brings peace into our hearts. Sometimes, though, we're the ones at fault. We're the ones who've caused pain, and we need to ask for forgiveness. Remember, you might need forgiveness. Jesus had a lot to say about anger and sin and broken relationships. Our second scripture that comes from the Gospel of Matthew, from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, says, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave the gift right there in front of the altar and go and be reconciled with them first, and then come and offer your gift." There's a sense of urgency in this lesson. Settle the matter quickly, Jesus goes on to say. He recommends quick, deliberate action. You know, I can't help thinking about the fire training that we all got as children. Don't you remember the stop, drop, and roll? Stop! Stop whatever you're doing! Stop moving or you'll fan the flames on your clothing. Drop! Drop to the ground. Cover your face. Protect your face. Roll! Turn around and roll on the ground so that you extinguish the flames because of lack of oxygen. That same stop, drop, and roll are three principles that can help plant God's truth about asking for forgiveness in our hearts. First, stop. Stop and acknowledge that you have broken a relationship and begin immediately to make it right. Jesus said, if you're on your way to worship and realize someone has a grudge against you, stop and put aside whatever you thought you were going to offer and leave it immediately to go and make things right. Stop and admit to yourself that you have hurt someone. It's a hard step. It is hard to realize that you have hurt someone, that you've done wrong, that you're at fault. It's so much easier at first, it seems, to try and ignore it and hope that it goes away, or to cover it up with excuses, fancy talk, or lies. Insecure people use denial and blame to try and escape from realizing their own failure. But broken relationships can't be healed without asking for forgiveness. There is not a Christmas present that you could purchase that will substitute for "I'm sorry, will you forgive me?" It's hard to put ourselves at the mercy of others. But if we don't ask God for the courage to do that, that hurt is going to fester and your relationship is going to rot. Making amends means taking responsibility for what we have done. Step one, stop. Think about what you've done. Understand the pain you've caused. Accept responsibility and pray to God for the courage and the opportunity to talk to the one you've hurt and ask for forgiveness. Second, drop. Jesus said, abandon your offering. Leave immediately. Go to this friend and make things right. How does one make things right? How do you ask for forgiveness? Well, first you have to think about what you're going to say. You've got to think about what you've done. You've got to put yourself in that person's position, in their point of view. Feel the feelings that they could have felt. Your mistake doesn't make you a bad person, but your behavior was wrong. So humble yourself and be honest and put aside all of your excuses. Write down what you're going to say. This helps you organize your thoughts. It acknowledges what you've done and the pain you've caused, and it asks for forgiveness. Taking time to write it down demonstrates thoughtfulness and care. And then go and meet face to face if possible and say, "I'm sorry," and ask for forgiveness, and then wait. Let the other person respond to you. Don't you get defensive. Allow them time to process what you've said, to sort of revisit that hurt that you've caused, and then move past it. Allowing them the space to say, "I forgive you," helps them get to the point that they let go of that pain and no longer bring it up or hold it over you. You do your part, and then you trust that God is going to help with the rest. Their change of heart may be immediate or delayed. There are several possible outcomes. First, they may have no idea what you're talking about. They just don't even remember the event as you do. I remember once that I went to my dad when I was like 30-something years old. I had been a pill at a certain point in my teen years, and I always held on to that. I always felt bad about that. And finally, when I was mature enough, I went to my dad and I'm like, Dad, do you remember when? And I was such a pill, and will you forgive me? You know, he didn't even remember. He had forgiven me immediately without me even asking, and he had no memory. He hadn't carried that hurt all those years. Sometimes they not only accept your apology, but they take responsibility for their role in it. Anytime that you have a relationship, you've got two people, and they both have responsibilities in that relationship. So sometimes when you go to say, I'm sorry for the hurt I've caused, they'll say, I forgive you. And you know what? I had a role in that too. I'm sorry too. Will you forgive me? Sometimes they're just going to say, yes, I forgive you. And they're just going to leave it right at that. And sometimes they're not going to be ready to forgive you. If this is the case, just leave quietly. Romans 12:18 reminds us, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you, you have begun the peace process of forgiveness. And you're just going to have to trust God to take care of the rest in God's time. Doesn't let you off the hook. You have to continue to live in a manner that demonstrates that you are consistently trustworthy and avoid slipping back into that harmful behavior. Okay, lastly, stop, drop, and roll. Turn. Give your life to God. Jesus told us to first go and be reconciled with that other person and then come and offer your gift. Give yourself to God as a holy, living sacrifice. Our first and greatest commandment is to love God with all of your heart and your soul and your mind. By asking forgiveness, you've already shown that you value relationships between yourself and another person. Now demonstrate that you love God. In the Message, this verse from Romans 12:1 is interpreted like this. It says, God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, you're sleeping and you're eating and you're going to work and you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing that you can do for God. We hear the same passage echoed in our communion liturgy. We say, in remembrance of these, your mighty gifts in Jesus Christ, we offer ourselves in praise and thanksgiving as a holy and living sacrifice in union with Christ's offering for us. Stop, drop, give. Stop and acknowledge the harm you've already caused. Drop what you're doing and make it right. And then roll back to God. Give your life to God as a holy, living sacrifice. Forgiveness is the answer to so much of the world's pain. The war between combatants is about getting even, but forgiveness is about getting along. It is the key to relationships. A marriage isn't going to survive a year without both spouses saying from time to time, I'm sorry and I forgive you. It's the key to our relationship with God. God offers us a chance to mature past our mistakes and errors, to love more deeply, and to learn from our mistakes by accepting and extending forgiveness and then moving forward in new ways. Last night when Frank and I were watching TV, I heard a great line. This growing daughter says, there sure were a lot of people in church this morning. And her father replied, it's the Christmas rush. They are all trying to wipe the slate clean before the 25th. Advent is a season for self-examination and reflection. It's a time to see what we have been writing on those slates and turn or repent or come back to God's loving ways. We do that in worship through communion. Confession and the words of assurance are always part of our communion liturgy. Because after examining our errors, we remember that Jesus already wiped the slate clean. And so we know that nothing stops us from loving God and from God loving us. However, there could still be a list of grievances between family members or co-workers or friends. And so passing the peace is also part of our communion practice. It's more than just a good time to get up and say hello to your fellow friend in the pew. It's part of our worship so that people have the opportunity to cross over the aisle and actually say, I'm sorry, or you're forgiven, to someone else in the community. It's a time to wipe the slate clean between folk. Remember, these hurts are only written in chalk. If you shouldn't let them become etched on your soul. Reach out and say, I'm sorry, or I forgive you before it's too late. Before it's too late and you find yourself having to communicate through prayer or a memorial letter because face-to-face isn't a possibility anymore. Stop, drop, and give. Christmas is forgiving. Christmas is for forgiving. Amen.
Amen. Amen.